Eddie Van Halen, the band Van Halen's incredibly gifted guitarist, is considered a music legend, having sold about 80 million records and received high praise from critics. Van Halen had his fair share of opponents and haters throughout his career, just like any other human being, even with his enormous success. Several well-known musicians have voiced their disapproval of him. Here are a handful of noteworthy instances. Jerry Garcia. Vocalist of the Grateful Dead and a master guitarist, Jerry Garcia wasn't overly enthralled by Van Halen's fast-paced G-guitar playing. In an interview from 1985, Garcia said that he didn't hear the same depth and graceful rhythms in Van Halen's music. "Because I can hear what's happening in there. There isn't much there that interests me. It isn't played with enough deliberateness, and it lacks a certain kind of rhythmic elegance that I like music to have, that I like notes to hate," he said during a 1985 interview with Frets magazine. "There's a lot of notes and stuff, but the notes aren't saying much, you know." Lindsay Buckingham. The lead guitarist of Fleetwood Mac, Lindsay Buckingham, approached music differently from Van Halen. Instead than emphasizing individual skill, Buckingham thought the music should be highlighted. He believed that the core of their band's music was overshadowed by Van Halen's guitar prowess. In a 2012 interview with Guitar World Acoustic via Far Out, Buckingham stated that his goal as a musician is to promote the compositions of his fellow musicians, whereas Van Halen's work was thought to be primarily created to display his technical prowess. "I've always believed that you play to highlight the song, not to highlight the player. The song is all that matters. There are two ways you can choose to go. You can try to be someone like Eddie Van Halen, who is a great guitarist, a virtuoso. Yet he doesn't make good records because what he plays is totally lost in the context of this band's music." Getty Lee. Van Halen and Canadian rock band Rush clashed at a gig in Leicester, England. Van Halen's crew interrupted Rush's celebration, resulting in a conflict. Later, Lee approached Van Halen to seek reconciliation but was unexpectedly pushed to the ground by a security officer. Lee Roth told Cream in 1981, via 2112.net, that Rush and Van Halen may have had some conflict or disagreement. Despite this, Getty Lee of Rush permitted the Van Halen members to enter the bar and hang out with Eddie Van Halen. And they cleaned the place out, which put their guys on edge a little bit. They'd both been drinking a little bit, and Getty was playing some Rush tapes on a tape recorder. He said something to Ed, and Ed's beer got into the tape recorder, Roth explained. Well, that caused a little friction. Lee Roth. Despite their successful cooperation, Van Halen and Lee Roth had a turbulent relationship. Their creative differences and confrontations eventually caused Roth to leave the band. Although they briefly reconnected in the 2000s, Roth acknowledged in a podcast that they had always disliked each other. Roth openly acknowledged via Metal Sucks during his interview on WTF with Mark Maron in 2019. "There were always creative differences. We've never gotten along. We started in rival bands, bitter rivals. But we were thrown together and it was amazing." As for exactly when he and Van Halen's mutual dislike began, Roth claimed it had been going on forever. "We have always hated each other, right up until the last phone call.